So this is the easiest route that I found to a sourdough pain de mie, that beautifully soft sandwich loaf. Now I haven't wanted to break tradition with this one, so I've kept the classic ingredients and percentages. I've just redesigned the fermentation method and architecture around a sourdough starter. Now I use a mixer for this one, and honestly, if you can follow a few steps, you're going to be fine with this. The formula's been designed to fit the baking tins that I'm actually using. I'm going to leave those linked in the recipe below, along with the baking timeline, the development notes, the formula, and the method. Everything that you're going to need to get this right. Let's jump in. Right, so this formula uses 12% butter and 9% sugar. And while it isn't super enriched, it's still enough just to slow that fermentation down. So I'm bringing 497 grams of milk just up to room temperature so I don't delay the fermentation any more than that. I'm going to add that to my mixer bowl along with 746 grams of high protein white bread flour. Next, I'm adding 66 grams of active sourdough starter. That's 100% hydrated. Now, I find it much quicker just to bring all of this together into a rough dough by hand. But if you want to use your mixer, fill your boots, that's absolutely fine. Now, if you want to scale this recipe down to make a single loaf or adjust the dough size to fit your own tin, I'll leave my recipe calculator linked below and on the recipe page. Now, once all of this dough comes together, I'm just going to cover it up and then I'm going to leave it to rest. Now, my entire fermentation chain, the starter, the bulk fermentation and the proving is all carried out at 24 degrees Celsius or 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Right, so after the rest, I'm going to load the bowl onto my Halo Pro and I'm going to start the mixing process at 10% power. That's around 75 RPM, okay? Now the dough's already quite well developed after that rest, but I want to keep mixing until it is really well developed. That's going to take around 8 minutes or so, okay? Now at that point, I'm going to sprinkle over 75 grams of sugar and I'm going to let the mixer continue to do its job. After a couple of minutes, you're going to see that the dough becomes smooth again and it's going to completely absorb all of that sugar. Now at this point, I sprinkle over 17 grams of salt and then I let it continue to mix until everything's absorbed, just like the sugar. Lastly, I'm going to add 100 grams of room temperature butter. I'm going to do that in 3 stages, and between each addition, I'm going to leave that mixer to fully incorporate all of that butter into the dough. The entire butter stage took 8 minutes of mixing. Now, once that dough's smooth and it's clean to the touch, I can turn it out onto my bench, just pull it all together and then pop it into my bulk container. Now it can be left to bulk ferment. Now, enriched doughs take a little bit longer to bulk ferment than the old lean dough. So I normally give the dough around 3 to 4 kind of coil folds like this right there in the container. I don't mess around with the dough too much, but if you prefer to stretch it out on the countertop or if you want to laminate it like I do the lean doughs, that's absolutely fine. You don't need to stress. Now my dough has taken 8 hours to bulk ferment. It's increased in volume by around 75%. But remember, your timeline may vary and it will depend on your kitchen temperature, your dough temperature, and of course, your starter strength. Just make sure that you follow the dough and not the clock. Now, this is going to make 2 loaves. So I've divided all of this dough up into 6 equal pieces. It's just going to sit here on the countertop and rest for 20 minutes. Now we just need to get the dough into the tins. So I'm going to roll each piece up, creating tension on the surface of the dough. Now it's much easier to do this with all the bits of dough first and then pop them into the tin. It just stops them spreading out and makes it a little bit easier to nestle in. Finally, I use a plastic bench scraper just to neaten up the dough. Don't overthink this stage. I promise you, your shaping doesn't need to be perfect because our tin is going to contain the dough anyway. As long as your dough is properly sized for your tin, you won't have any problems. Now they can just be left to proof. Right, so these have taken 3 hours to proof for the dough to come up and touch the underside of the lid. About 30 minutes before that, I preheated my oven using bake mode to 220 degrees Celsius or 430 degrees Fahrenheit. Now I find I get a much more even bake on the crust if I don't use a baking stone or steel, okay? After 50 minutes of baking, the internal temperature hits 97 degrees Celsius or 207 degrees Fahrenheit, and they are baked. So I remove them immediately from the tins and then I just leave them to cool completely on the cooling rack. This formula has easily earned a permanent place in my baking rotation. It is simplicity at its best. The crust is just that little bit firmer than the crumb, but it's still nice and soft, and it carries that toasty flavour from baking. The crumb itself is super soft, with this perfect balance of richness and sweetness. It's got all of those great characteristics of pain de mie, while it brings that sourdough character of its own. And you know what? It's got a great shelf life too. It stays soft enough for fresh sandwiches for a couple of days, and then after that it's a knockout for grilled cheese sandwiches, French toast, or you know what, just simple toast. Give this one a whirl, let me know what you think.